Thanks for clicking on the video. Like, subscribe, and share if you find this useful or interesting. Okay, so I've been talking about these rolling blends and how it's going to be a ton of work. Well, it's not that much work compared to some of the things we've already done, but it will be fairly tricky to create new cut points and properly synchronize them front to back, to go from the sections that have rolling corners to the ones that don't. And in the end, I said we're going to end up still replacing this surface with a filling surface from the FreeCAD's solid surface workbench. So a good question would be, why don't we just do that directly? And sometimes you can. Sometimes it's good enough. So let's try it. I'm going to hide my preview blend. I'm going to select these three surfaces, which are my simple edge blends, which are not that hard to set up. I have these three objects. I turn on the view. It's not happy about something. It's not showing me the view options that I want. Oh, it's because these are the links. Okay, hold on a second. Turn off the view sets. Turn off the solid. Turn on my final surfaces. And let's look right here. I take this preview surface, this preview blend, I hide it. I take these three surfaces, which are my edge blends, and I'm going to change them from solid to flat lines, which will allow me to select their edges. And now I go to the surface workbench. What is it? Surface. Right here. I'm going to start the filling surface. I'm going to select this edge in the back, this edge right here, and this edge right here. So it already filled in the surface, but it's not aligned to anything. It's only considering the curves. And it says this is what a blend would look like. But let's double click these edges, point out that there's a face next to each of them, and that we would like to align G1 to that face, and then hit accept. Do the next one. Do the next one. Accept, and then hit OK. So it looks pretty good, right? Well, sometimes it's perfectly acceptable. But let's crank up the resolution on these guys. 1 degree here. And I'm going to go all the way down to 0.1. Don't do this on the entire model. But on just one surface at a time, it's okay. So this looks great. Why would we bother doing anything else? It's still a little bit choppy on the resolution, but we could crank it up more if we wanted it in the final model. The question is this acceptable for you? And sometimes the answer will be yes. So you can see that this is a dynamic thing that updates properly as you adjust the model, and when you're done designing, you can simply replace it with a filling surface if you like it. The reason it's useful to have this preview is that this does not update well. Even though there's only one face attached to each edge, and there's 3 edges, if I update this model, there's a good chance this will not update. It's kind of random if it does or not. But there's a bigger problem for me. I think there's too much crease in this area. Technically, it did exactly what I want. And it's interesting to note that even just selecting only G1 across the surfaces actually gives you a result that is incredibly close to G2. So the way this averages across the edges is really good, better than silk in some ways. The reason I still do the other stuff with silk is I don't like the middle of this surface. I don't like this folding here. So let's take a look at how this surface is created and what kind of surfaces. I go to this curves workbench, and I have this tool here, the geometry information tool. And let's click this face. And now we can see what a filling surface is. It creates an enormous patch that has a bazillion control points in one direction and the other direction. It's still a 4-sided patch. This is needed. Underneath there's always a 4-sided patch. Asterisk. But look at this one. So it created this massive patch, and then it moved the points around until it fitted the surfaces. And then it moved the points around some more until the surfaces were more or less aligned. That's a really cool trick if you like the quality. But part of the reason I don't like this corner here is you can see that I had to do some really wild stuff to these control points. to get them to align with G1 along this edge. And so to me, I look at this mesh and I say, it's really pretty in a lot of areas, but the stuff it has to do to make G1 work is kind of a bad quality surface just because this mesh is not very even. And you can't edit this, and you have very limited control over what this type of surface does. Now, you do have options, and you can crank a lot of different things on here. You can increase the degree, you can increase the number of points on each curve. You can do a lot of things, but it will still be an object of this nature. A large number of control points, outside curves that don't relate to the edges, and then a final trimming to match your input curves, and really weird stuff happening inside the mesh in order to try to trick it into the shape you want. So I will use this, absolutely, but I only like to use it on this face because this face is almost completely flat. It's not driving the shape of my model. So I think that this type of thing is appropriate right here. But on this whole area, I prefer to use the silk things because they don't have unexpected folds in here. I have a very straightforward way of saying how this four-sided patch here is going to behave. So I find that for prominent features of the model, I much prefer the silk surfaces to the surface filling workbench. But sometimes it's not worth it. If you have something complicated and it's in a flat area, relatively flat area, or it's in some region you're not going to look at, then the filling surface is just fine. It's a personal choice of how far you want to go with each model. So remember that when we're creating the rolling blends on this area, it has to be by choice because we don't like the simpler options. The preview blend is not good enough, and the surface filling workbench fill surface is not good enough for our particular application. All right, next time, I swear, we're actually going to do it. See you then. Hey, I just jumped back into recording to show you a little bit more about these. The one we did on the front, I got to be honest, it looked pretty good, despite what I said being true about I don't like the way the mesh is generated, or at least I have issues with the way the mesh is generated. But it would look pretty good. So to be fair to both sides, let me show you what happens on the back side. So I did the same thing to this area, and the surface itself is beautiful, right? Because I've got a high quality. But here you can see more of the design issues I was talking about. It's doing everything I asked it to do, but not only does it have a little bit of crease right here, which you could argue was like, well, that's what you're asking for with the way you've created these surfaces. And if you change your curves, you would get it. Maybe you would get what you want. So let's look at the back instead and see the kind of things that pop up. Not only do I have here, the crease is just massive. And where is it coming from? It's coming from the fact that we have no way to explain to the surface that we don't want this big lump right here. I don't have a way to explain to the surface that, hey, you need to maintain the fact that most of the bend in this curve is all the way at the edge, and I want it to look like a fillet overall, and I want this part to remain flat. You could try to add more guide curves to this filling surface. The problem with guide curves is that they need to be really, really good. If you draw a diagonal here, how are you going to create this diagonal so that it's really, really flat here and places the curve exactly where you want? It's going to be really tough to create that curve so that it matches perfectly to these two in a diagonal and creates this blend here, the turn just in the corner. Maybe it's not impossible, but it's super, super finicky. Because as you add more and more curves to these filling surfaces, matching the outer seams becomes harder and harder. It's not impossible, and sometimes you can get lucky. Maybe you could try to add a curve from here to here instead. But if you do that, if you add more curves on the inside, you have to give up tangency to these side surfaces, otherwise the system breaks down. Not because the tool is bad, but it's almost impossible for you to actually draw good curves that explain what you want in the middle and are still sufficiently connected and smooth at the edge to not conflict with the input surfaces. So that's the trade-off. Sometimes it's fine, and use it when it's fine, but if you get these unwanted bulges in areas you don't want, and you get these dips in areas you don't want, honestly, you might be better off with just the silk preview surface. So let's take a look again at the geometry info on this one. It's actually super smooth in this area, right? The grid looked great, and it's only in these little corners that the grid looks bad. Contrast that with the silk preview blend. I can only show one grid at a time with this tool. And this tool didn't exist when I created silk. The curves workbench and silk were pretty much created at the exact same time and just do things in very different ways. And I love the curves workbench for the cool toys that it gives me. It just works completely differently. So look at these grids instead. They're really good in the corners. That's the strength of silk. It's really, really good in the corners, but it's a little bit weaker in the center. And this one is just, there's a single grid. Some parts of it are good, but they don't do what you want. And some part of it, like the corners, look kind of like what you want, but that's where the most weirdness actually occurs in the grid. So these are different tools that work in different ways, different strengths, different weaknesses. Right now, I'm not happy with either of them, so I'm going to do my rolling one.